Hello and welcome to episode 28 of the Primary Maths podcast, the show where we talk all things primary maths, with me, Jon Cripwell.
And me, Becky Brown.
Hello, Becky. How are you?
Hello, I'm good, thank you, Jon. It's been an exciting week, hasn't it, in the world of education this week? So it's been quite busy. But yeah, I've had a good week, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm well, thank you. I'm well. It has been a busy week. If you missed it, and there's a fair chance you might have done if you've not been paying attention to my social media or Twinkl social media, the curriculum and assessment review led by Professor Becky Francis was published when this goes out on Friday. We're recording it on Thursday. It was published on Wednesday this week, and the government's response to it as well. And so yesterday, when that was published, Becky and I were joined for an emergency podcast episode. We were joined by Sally Cole and Lisa Tunnicliffe, our colleagues here at Twinkl, part of the maths team, to give our reaction to it. So if you want to know a little bit more about the curriculum and assessment review, what it might mean for maths, primary maths in particular, then definitely have a listen to that episode. And if you're just more interested in what it had to say more widely, it's a huge document, 197 pages, plus appendices, and then the government's response as well on top. Twinkl have put together a curriculum and assessment review hub landing page. And the brilliant thing, Becky, I don't know if you've seen this yet, but all of the leads for different areas of the curriculum have kind of condensed the curriculum and assessment review into some key takeaways, and those are listed up there on the blog. Have you had a look at it yet?
I had a quick look this morning, Jon, and I think it's brilliant. I think particularly, it's easy for us because it's part of our role, but if you're a busy teacher in the classroom, you probably haven't got time to read all 197 pages. So to be able to go and pick the bits that that you're interested in, if you're a subject leader of a particular subject or a particular age range, really useful place to go and find a quick summary about the bare bones of what the review had inside it.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'll share a link to it in the in the show notes for this episode. But it is, we don't often plug things on the show, but I just think it's a really useful resource, to be honest. So go and have a look. You can find out a little bit more about the review and see how it might have implications for the new curriculum, which is likely to land less than 2 years now, Becky. Less than 2 years, and we'll have a shiny new curriculum ready to be taught in September 2028.
Yeah, it is. We are still very close to the start of a very long journey, aren't we? But we have made the first steps, which is great.
Yeah, and it's nice that a lot of the things that we talk about regularly on this show and our guests talk about as well. Clearly, Professor Becky Francis has been listening to the podcast. Hello, Becky. I hope you're enjoying it. Clearly, she's been listening and taken all of that on board. So thank you for that. So today, Becky, I was just having a look and thinking we're going to do a slightly shorter episode because we've had earlier this week, Michelle Windridge joined us for a special episode all about EYFS Maths. That seems like a long time ago for me now. We recorded that on Monday morning. It went out on Tuesday. And then the curriculum and assessment review landed on Wednesday. And now we're here on Thursday. It seems like a busy week. But we had that episode. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, if that's okay. We also had the emergency podcast episode, our first ever emergency podcast episode. I did steal the emergency podcast line, I think, from Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart's The Rest is Politics podcast. They often do emergency podcasts when something big happens in politics. And I thought, you know what? This is big in education, so we'll do an emergency podcast. Anyway, I was looking at what was going on. We had my youngest daughter's parents' evening this week in her primary school. She's in year 3. I was looking through her maths book, obviously. Had a quick flick through English and topic and stuff, but maths was where I was concerned. And noticed that they're just coming on to division. And one of the conversations I know we've had a lot, and I've had a lot with other teachers over years, is why is division a particularly tricky subject to teach and for children to learn? So I pondered that a little bit, and I thought maybe just worth having a quick chat about that, really, because
Yeah.
I think it's one of those subjects that when it comes up, lots of teachers dread it, because they know it's going to be tricky. It's going to take a while. It takes longer than you think, usually, to teach division.
Always.
Always.
Mhm.
Children just don't seem to get it as intuitively as they do addition, maybe, or even multiplication. Um, and so I just thought, you know what, let's have a quick chat about that, because there'll be lots of people now just beginning to teach or have been teaching division. And if we can help them in any way, then that might be useful. So I think initially what I've just said, really, Becky, it's not as intuitive as addition or multiplication, because in those ways you are putting things together. And I
Yeah.
think just naturally we're better at grouping things together than we are at dividing them equally, putting them into equal groups. I think it's just cognitively harder to get our head around. And in the same way that subtraction, I think, is harder than addition. And it's interesting, I was with some skit students this week and we were talking about the different ways that we do subtraction. And so many of them talked about the fact that often they count on to do subtraction. So they're doing addition to do subtraction when
Yeah.
they're finding the difference, particularly. And so we just seem to lean more into putting things together and adding that additive relationship than we do dividing or subtracting. So
Yeah.
there's that. I think there's also the fact that, things aren't always our early experiences of sharing things aren't always sharing things equally. Even if you are a kind person and you want to, share things equally, that's not always the case, is it? That things get shared
No,
out equally in life.
and sharing, of course, sharing is a mathematical word, but it's also a very used word in general life, isn't it? And you don't necessarily mean it in a mathematical sense. So I think you're right that that's a bit confusing, maybe.
Yeah,
I think,
definitely when it comes to word problems. I mean, you can have a word problem where Tom shares his sweets with his sister. He's got 20 sweets and he gives her 5. Well, that's fine, because, he is sharing them with her, but that's not equal sharing. And so we get very specific, don't we, with division, that it has to be equal portions for each group that you're sharing them into. There's also the fact that there's two models of division that often get mixed up. So there's sharing that we've just been talking about, partitive division. So, for example, I have 12 sweets shared between 4 friends. How many do they get each? So there we're sharing them. And then there's quotative or grouping, where I have 12 sweets. I need to put them into bags of 4, or 4 in a bag. How many bags do I have? And those things mean very different
yeah,
things, even though the answers might be the same. And
yeah. And then you start throwing in remainders and how that affects the different types as well. And that is a whole
yeah,
other ball game, isn't it?
yeah. So it's messy, isn't it? It's a little bit more messy than multiplication or addition. The language is inconsistent, as you say. So divide 12 by 3, or 3 goes into 12. We hear that sometimes, don't we? 12 shared by 3. 3 different ways of saying basically the same thing, but they all sound quite different. The language of divisor and dividend and quotient and things are unfamiliar. I would say more unfamiliar,
Yeah.
and not used as often. Inverse relationships can be tricky to see as well, and also the methods for doing division in and of themselves can be tricky, can't they? They don't seem as intuitive in terms of the place valueness, or columnness. They look different, don't they? They look totally different. Whether
Yeah.
you are chunking, doing long division, short division, whatever you want to say, they look different to the other ways of following procedures. So all of these things, I think, add to the fact that there's a bit of a mystery around division. And then if you are not secure with your times tables, and definitely when it comes to long division, having that true fluency in being able to manipulate number and quickly calculate and quickly add and quickly see connections between numbers, it just becomes so hard
Yeah, and I think
to get an answer.
we almost, when we have learnt a written method for division, it almost becomes the default, but it often isn't the most efficient way. I was doing some division with a year 6 yesterday, and we've talked about flexible partitioning. Of course, you need to have a really good understanding of number to do that, but partitioning a number in a different way can just make mental division so much easier. But you need to see that first. So that's just adding in another step.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there already feels like a lot of steps, doesn't there?
Yes.
So I think what some of the schemes do quite well is to break it down into small steps. What I think often happens, though, is that those small steps are seen as individual lessons, and actually, the the truth is you're probably going to have to spend longer on each of those small steps than is necessarily planned for in a scheme of learning, because
Yeah.
everybody, it is such a tricky concept. I also think from a maths lead point of view, it'd be really interesting to have a look around your school when they're doing division. Is there more sharing going on than grouping? Is there more grouping going on than sharing? Are teachers familiar with those two different um, structures of division? Is it important that they're? I think it is personally, from that understanding,
Yeah.
knowing which model I'm going to use to represent it. But are teachers familiar with it? Do they know why it's being taught in that way? And that's probably my final point. Is just that subject knowledge is really, really important when it comes to division, because it is complicated. If you don't know why you are teaching it the way that you're being asked to teach, you're liable to miss the point, I think. So
Yeah.
spending that time to look into it is really important.
Much harder to explain something conceptually if you're not fully on board with it yourself. And division feeds into so many other things. When you start thinking about fractions and ratio,
Yeah.
it's important to get it right, isn't it? And to understand the different structures. So yeah, I think you're right, John. Subject knowledge and division, it probably is a difficult area, but important to get it right.
Yeah, and I'd just be interested, people listening out there, if you are teaching division at the moment, what's the biggest barrier to children being able to be successful at division? And also, just I'd also love to hear. Do get in touch. Primary Maths Podcast at twinkl.co.uk. That's Twinkl without an E. Do what is the main barrier to children learning division or being successful at division? And also, what do you perceive to be success in division? Is it getting the right answer, or is it understanding what's happening on the way to getting that answer? Because I think getting the right answer isn't necessarily that important until probably year 6 when it comes to division. I think really understanding what's happening when we're trying to get towards that answer is probably more important. But challenge me on that. Absolutely feel free to challenge me on that and see what I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, definitely. So, yeah, we'll come back to division, Becky, if that's all right. I'd love to do a little bit
Absolutely.
more on it,
Yeah, it would be good one.
potentially next week, but I'd like to hear people's thoughts on it before we do. Change of tack. I believe you have a maths of life for me, Becky. I don't know anything about
Well,
this.
I do. It's just a quick one, John, but it's actually very closely linked to what you've just said, because it's to do with
That's
our
remarkable, given
perception.
that we
I know.
absolutely. I know everybody will think that this is a carefully planned podcast, but this week it has gone out the window. We are flying blind, aren't we, this week? So you had
Yeah.
no idea that I was about to talk about division, and I had no idea about this. So yeah, go on.
Yes, because what I'm about to talk about is all to do with our perception of seeing maths as getting the right answer. Because it was another theatre reference, I'm afraid. I spent another week in the theatre last week. This time my children were on the stage, but I was there every day. And We always have a little bit of a difficulty selling tickets for Halloween, particularly for a children's performance, for obvious reasons. So we were looking at
Sorry, is this a
ways.
stage adaptation of Halloween, the movie,
Absolutely not.
with
No,
children? I mean, that would be,
but
yeah.
that would not be appropriate at all, would it? No, it
No,
happened to be
it
on
wouldn't.
Halloween. It was actually Newsies Junior. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Oh, very
Um,
nice.
but yes, so we floated some offers. So there were some offers going around for Halloween just to try to get more people in the theatre for that day. They had some sellouts later in the week and earlier in the week, but that particular performance we were struggling with. So a Facebook post went out to show all the different offers that were available. And I think there were 4 altogether. There was one around returning customers getting a free ticket. There was one around having a certain amount off of a ticket. There was one about a 20% discount for a particular row or particular performance that day. And then there was a discount for a group buy. So it was quite overwhelming. And I just thought, and it doesn't, there are so many things that go into those. Were they concessions? Were they large groups, small groups? You'd have to know, have a lot of information and have a really quite a good understanding of fundamental maths, not necessarily easy maths, but fundamentals to be able to work out what was the best offer for you. And I just was thinking about how people often say to me, well, I don't need to know that because I've got a calculator on my phone and it's in my pocket all the time. And for those of us that have been teaching long enough to remember the calculator paper in year 6,
Yep.
it wasn't suddenly an easier paper because the children had a calculator. And I think today I've tutored year 7s who suddenly say, I've got a calculator now, so it's going to do all the maths for me. But it isn't as straightforward as that, is it? It's not about just putting in the numbers and getting the right answer. You need to know what to put in. So
Yeah.
just thinking about how having that calculator on your phone or your watch or, with you all the time isn't the same as having a fundamental knowledge of how maths works. And actually, you probably need both to be able to get the best deal.
Totally agree. The calculator can take all that cognitive load, can't it, of actually doing some of the calculations, but it won't tell you what calculations you need to be able to do.
No,
AI, on the other hand, Becky, AI, on the other hand, might help us with that a little bit. Although at the moment, if you listen back to the episode with Simon Bond from a couple of weeks ago, it's probably not that reliable when it comes to maths at the moment. But that might
not
change.
yet.
It will change. It will change. However, I think it's still important to be able to check, is what I'm being told by AI actually a sensible answer or not? Because,
Yeah.
we shouldn't just trust things blindly, should we? So, again, important to be able to problem solve. And calculators do not problem solve for us, do they?
Nope.
Just going on to Monday's episode, then we'll just do a very quick recap, if that's okay, of the key takeaways from that episode, where I was lucky to be joined by my wonderful colleague Michelle Windridge, who is our national lead for school-based EYFS, and I really, really did enjoy having a chat with her on Monday, all about maths in EYFS and what that might look like. I was just aware, Becky, that I think, as I mentioned in the episode, it's just an area of the school that is less familiar to many people. Yourself, I know you've worked in primary schools before, but you're in a junior school now
Yeah.
when you're teaching, so you don't get to interact with EYFS colleagues or pupils. And it's just an area that, because it's only 1 year out of the 7, or 8 if you've got a nursery that children might spend in a primary school, it can remain a bit of a mystery. So I just wanted to spend a little bit of time in that episode just revealing what actually goes on and why in an EYFS classroom. So I hope you found it interesting.
I loved it. I mean, as a parent to 2 children who are no longer early years, although sometimes I wish they were, I always have had a lot of respect for early years teachers. I think, oh my goodness, it's hard enough with one child, but a whole class of them. So I've never thought, I'd love to teach early years personally. However, listening to Michelle and you talking about EYFS, I was thinking, actually, there is something quite appealing about it. And I think I think actually the primary for the Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 could learn a lot from the way things happen in early years.
Yeah,
I was
totally agree.
listening thinking, wouldn't that be great if we could do that further up the school? Wouldn't it great if we could have a bit more learning by osmosis and a bit less, this is how it has to be done, and going outside and exploring? That's what maths is. And I think, unfortunately, we do lose that as we go further up the school a
Quite
little bit. I
quickly.
mean, not always,
Quite
but
quickly as well.
yeah. So
I
I did
remember,
come
I think
away.
I may have said this before, I remember my eldest daughter coming home from her first day in year one. At the school that I worked at, it was a brilliant school and the year one teachers were brilliant, and it wasn't like this all the time, but she'd come home um, from her first day in year one, and she said, there are toys, Daddy, but they're on the shelf in the classroom, and we can't get them. I just thought, oh, that's so sad. You know, and they did later obviously get to play with them and things, and there were opportunities for that. But I just thought that is indicative of how quickly the transition can happen from play-based learning to we're sitting at tables now and, listening to the teacher and doing our worksheets.
Yeah, and that is not going to suit all children. It's probably never going to suit some children, actually learning in that specific way. I just think the idea that she was talking about designing tasks, thinking about that continuous provision, she described it as when you go in, it might look a bit chaotic, but it isn't. Everything is planned. Task design is really important. And I think that is particularly in maths. We should be designing tasks to think about what we want children to notice rather than just churning out more and more and going through more and more slides or worksheets. And I think Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2 have a lot to learn from the way things happen in EYFS. I don't think that's the way it's going to go, unfortunately. But that really struck me when listening to your interview on Tuesday.
I think I did embrace that as a year 6 teacher. I think you could have walked into my classroom and thought that it was just chaos. Occasionally it was just chaos, but there was usually a plan under there somewhere. Whether it was going well or not is another matter. But I thought there were just lots of little takeaways to help people understand about why things are taught the way that they are in EYFS, what maths looks like in early years, because it isn't going to be a 45-minute or 60-minute maths lesson on the carpet with all the children working on whiteboards. It's just not appropriate at that age and stage. So it is very much more about using the environment, the adults in the room, all of the adults in the room, making the most of all those opportunities. And it's a real skill, because it's not like we're doing maths from 9 till 10 every morning, and after that I don't have to think about maths again. We're doing maths all day long every day, but we're also doing English all day long every day, and science all day long every day, and understanding of the world, and it's all there all the time. So I would find it tricky, I think. It is a real specialism, but as you say, Becky, I think there's something wonderful about it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great to listen to, and yet it did make me think, oh, I wouldn't mind just stepping into an EYFS classroom. Maybe not for long, but
No,
it
I
did
used to
make me
enjoy
think.
visiting. I still do enjoy
Yes.
visiting. I remember going
Yes.
to a school just at the probably spring term, I think, this year, doing a bit of a learning walk and going into EYFS, and there was lots of continuous provision going on, and children doing exactly what they should be, playing and things. And within about 2 minutes of being in the room, I've been handed sadly a pretend ice cream rather than a real one, but a pretend ice cream made of sand in a cone, and somebody's teddy as well, and somebody else asking if I could read a story to them. I was totally overwhelmed in that space of about 3 minutes, but it was joyous. It was joyous. It was definitely
Yeah.
that joyful chaos that Michelle mentioned. So it'd be interesting to know how many of our listeners are EYFS based. I know on our TikTok channel we get lots of EYFS colleagues liking our content and commenting and things like that. So it'd be great to know if you are an EYFS teacher who loves teaching maths. We'd love to hear from you and hear some
Yeah.
stories. Hear some stories about children's light bulb moments, or just breakthroughs that you've made, or funny stories that you've had from from teaching maths or moments that have, maths moments that have come up during the day. It'd be great to hear them.
Yeah, please do get in touch if you've got something to share that we can talk about on a future episode.
Absolutely. Twinkl, primary maths podcast at twinkl.co.uk. Becky, I think that will wrap us up for this week. It has been a busy week. There's lots to listen to if people want to go back and listen to previous episodes. But I think for now that will probably do us. On Tuesday next week, I will be joined by Kate Fern, talking all about times tables and how to actually teach them rather than just practice them or rehearse them. So I'm looking forward to that episode, Becky. I think it's going to be a really good one.
Yeah, me too, Jon. Thank you for joining us today. And please do give us a quick rating or a review. We'd really appreciate it. And it helps new listeners to find the podcast.
It certainly does. And we'll be back after that. I'll be back with Becky next Friday for another Aftermaths episode. In the meantime, have a great week.
See you next time.